Talking about basic anatomy. On the right side, you see that I have the arrow pointing in a diagram on the right side to the apical constriction, so to speak, or some people call it the minor foramina. It's the skinniest part of the canal that is most apical. That's where we need to instrument and obturate up to. Okay, that's basic endodontics. We're here working on the root canal system. So that's where the canal ends. If you don't instrument or obturate to there, or if you don't have that constriction for one reason or another, then stuff's going to go out the apex, whether you're using a down pack or a Guttacore or anything like that. So you got to respect that apical constriction, okay, or that apical stop, as some people call it. Otherwise, you're going to see what's happened in these radiographs on the left side. And we've known for years, we'd much rather not have a foreign body. I don't care how fancy the obturation system is, we'd much rather not have a foreign body in a periodontium that's just trying to heal. Okay, there's no good that's going to come out of having a foreign material irritate the periodontium. So why does this happen? Well, one of the basic things that you have to remember is that if you have an apical lesion, imagine it's outlined here with the arrows. On the left side, it's a two-dimensional radiograph of mine. On the right side, it's a cone beam image that I took of this upper canine. If you have an apical lesion, you must remember, basic anatomy, you've known this forever, that as the lesion eats, so to speak, as the infection and pathology eats away at the bone, what also happens is it eats away at the root. It resorbs the root tip, which means, as you see on the right side, the single arrow is pointing to the apex. Notice how the apex is sort of blown open. There's no constriction, there's no apical stop because the pathology ate the bone and the constriction. So now, no matter what system you're using, stuff's going to go out the apex if you're not mindful of this, okay? So here you see it in this little video where you see it's a large lesion and there's actual resorption of the apex. You must remember this. So when you have an endo case and you see a lesion radiographically, there's a good chance that that lesion, the infection, has also destroyed the apical constriction, okay? Please, please, please remember this. What do you do? Well, my tip for this, it's quite simple. And it's nothing new, but you got to have good working length. It is so important to have proper working length. It is such a fundamental part of endodontics that I feel we don't even talk about that enough. But that's one of the best ways to avoid having issues and stuff going out the apex. What do I mean? Well, you don't know where that constriction is. You're not going to take a cone beam 3D scan of every tooth. So your only way to know truly where the narrowest part of the canal is most apically, the only way, it's not by two-dimensional x-ray, the only way to know is use an apex locator. Not just that, you want to use a proper apex locator, not one that's jumping on you, whereas you're putting in your file and it's going, the apex locator is jumping on it. You know it's not accurate. And I've seen people love their apex locator and say, yeah, but you know what, most of the time it works okay. Well, to me it's not good enough. Because if it works okay on 3 out of 4 cases, then that poor 4th out of 4 cases patient is not going to have an endo that's substandard. So to me, I want to use an apex locator, as you're seeing here, where as I'm putting in my file, it's not jumping on me. It's a current generation, great apex locator with current technology, which is more predictable. It's not fussy, and it can give me the length that I need of that constriction. Then I know where to obturate up to, because imagine it's not an accurate apex locator. Imagine you're not even using an apex locator, and you're just going to say, well, all my obturations are going to be 1 millimeter of the working length on a two-dimensional film. What if the canal exits 2 millimeter laterally? Happens quite often, especially in posteriors. You don't know that unless you're using an apex locator, period. So that can make the difference between do you have stuff going out the apex or not. So either you have no apical constriction because the pathology resorbed the apex, or for all you know, you're 1 millimeter long, and in that case, your master file blew open the constriction. Inadvertently, not intentional, but you didn't have the right length. Only way for you to know you have the right length is using a good current generation of an apex locator, period. I can't stress that enough. And you got to remember that when it comes to obturation, okay? And then the final one of the final things is, again, if you have an apical lesion, as you see in this radiograph, remember that there's a good chance that as the infection ate away, so to speak, at the bone, it also resorbed the constriction. So one of the things that I very often recommend in my workshops or lectures is imagine a working length was 20 millimeters. Well, instead of obturating to 20 millimeters, when you know that there's now no apical stop because there is resorption, okay, you can almost assume that, then I would rather you obturate, say, 1 millimeter short. So if your working length is 20 millimeters, but you're assuming there's an apical stop, or if by mistake your master file went out the apex for a moment and you blew open your constriction, it's okay, it's happened to all of us, but you know you don't have constriction, then now you're going to obturate to maybe 19, 18 millimeters with your gutta core. Okay, this is just playing safe. I'd rather you be a tad short, but that way you're less likely to have stuff going out the apex. So you can't blame the gutta core or the sealer for getting all these extrusions. It's rarely the case. It has more to do with your length determination, the way you instrumented the canal, where you instrumented it up to, that sort of thing. So it's not the obturation itself, it's rarely that. And then the last one is almost like a little pet peeve of, it's actually not a little, it's a big pet peeve of mine, and this has to do a lot with unwinding nickel titanium files. A lot of folks out there talk about files that don't separate, they don't break. Great. We don't talk enough about files that may unwind, nickel titanium mechanized files. So imagine you're using your file, you know your working length is to 20 millimeters. Well, what if you're using a file that unwinds very easily? Not great quality, unwinds very easily. So now you're trying to instrument the rubber stopper is at 20 millimeters, but it unwound and stretched a millimeter. It spun tons of times, hundreds of times potentially inside that canal before you took it out and realized, oh, it's unwound. An unwound file that's maybe 21 millimeters to begin with now is 22 millimeters. So all of a sudden, you instrumented, let's say, a millimeter longer than what you thought. You blew open that constriction, didn't think much of it, and then wonder why now when it comes to obturation, you're getting stuff out the apex. It's because, again, you didn't quite appreciate what's happening at the apical constriction. So unwinding files, for me, is a huge issue. We should talk about it just as much as we talk about broken files, because the damage that they do to the apical part of the root is very, very significant. So the bottom line is, please try not to use nickel titanium mechanized files that unwind. Okay, try and do your best. I don't care how cheap or popular they may be, just try and avoid that, because that has a lot of consequences when it comes to obturation. Not to mention having that file push debris out the apex, post-op pain, complications with that, on and on. Nothing good comes out of a file that unwinds easily. Okay, so it's something for you to make note of when it comes to instrumenting.